It's time for a reality check.
We're here to deconstruct health and fitness trends and provide tangible advice so you can become 1% better with each choice starting today.
Because this is our first episode, we figured we'd give a quick intro, just who we are, what we do, and what led us to this platform and podcast with all of you. So the goal for these episodes is for them to be short, sweet, to the point, likely with some profanity and tangents along the way, so that you get the education without the unnecessary fluff. So Jess, do you want to give us a rundown?
Hello, I'm Jesse. So I am a certified personal trainer. I was training in person for a full 5 years before Jill and I connected to do more online coaching together. We're both certified nutrition coaches. We work with our clients a lot on metabolic adaptation and strength training and getting their bodies to really work for them so that they can kind of break this dieting and yo-yo cycle that so many women seem to be in. So my specialty is strength training, stress and sleep, and like behavioral change type stuff. So I went to school for psychology and neuroscience, and I really like to know, like, okay, what's the whys behind us doing this, and like really be able to give my clients tools so that they can change their habits forever versus just being like, here's a perfect plan that you can't sustain, you know? So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
And it's really cool that we have like two very different like backgrounds in terms of like how we integrated into this space, and for us to both be in really the same place of our approach personally and you know, obviously the way that we coach clients. So my background is actually in bodybuilding, which 0 out of 10 don't recommend starting or ever going down that path, but you do you. So you know, I competed in bodybuilding shows and very toxic relationship with food and fitness and all those things. I have been a certified personal trainer and nutrition coach since 2015, and I've been really on every end of the spectrum when it comes to just weight loss and fitness in general. I've done very extreme rigid diets and, you know, dealt with significant hormone imbalances that I know we'll talk about plenty on the show, but really I'm at such a place of being balanced, like mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And that's really what I want for everyone. And I think sometimes the word balance is a little bit,
fluffy, a little woo-woo for me.
It's a little woo-woo, but you know, I think it looks different for everybody. And that's the point of that word, is to find like whatever that peaceful middle ground looks like for you. And, you know, now I'm a master health coach and a functional nutrition coach. And I've learned a lot of lessons along the way that, you know, I'm just excited for us to kind of share everything that's in our brains, because there's a lot, even if it doesn't always make sense, and really just the no BS education side of things that we provide to women around the world. So all of that being said, let's dive into today's topic for episode number 1. And this topic is it actually your hormones? So I'm going to let Jess kick this off because she was kind of the reason behind us starting with this episode.
So yeah, I had a friend who posted something. She's a really good personal trainer. She posted something saying like, hey, women, I see all these health coaches like selling their services on the fact that you probably have hormonal issues. You don't need to get all these tests. Maybe it's not your hormones after all, whatever. And I was like, hold on, like I agree with you and I disagree with you. So that's kind of the point behind this podcast too, is like there's so many different pieces of advice out there. We want to give you like context to each of those pieces of advice so that you can really decide like, oh, okay, which path is right for me. So is it your hormones? We work with women. We work with a few hundred women who come from all different backgrounds. Lots have been extreme dieters before. Lots have been overeaters and are trending in binge eating, you know? So a really big variety. But what we end up finding is we put in some basic behavioral change and like health regimens into their habits, and things start to fix themselves. So like we don't initially say, hey, clients, we want all of you to get all these labs or whatever. But then 6 months in, their doctors are coming to us and saying like, wow, what are you doing with these people? Because their blood work looks better. Their insulin sensitivity is better. They have lost all this body fat, but they're actually keeping it off this time. We've had like probably 15 plus clients within the last year and a half get pregnant who told us they couldn't get pregnant. They had been through fertility treatments and all this stuff and nothing was working. We implement some basic things and they come to us and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm carrying a healthy pregnancy. And now we have these new moms that we're coaching through their postpartum journey. And it's so cool to see. So yeah, that's kind of like big picture why we're talking about this today.
Yeah. And I think that, one of the most common things or reasons that somebody comes to us and says, I think my hormones are off or imbalanced or whatever the case is weight loss resistance. They think I can't lose weight, so there must be a deeper issue. Not saying that there isn't, because oftentimes if we are, as Jess mentioned, under eating or overtraining or super stressed in life and just not managing our stress correctly, or, getting enough sleep in general, and we'll talk about all those tips and pieces of advice to improve those things. But it's not that there isn't a hormone imbalance. I think that sometimes women are looking for, excuse is not the right word. Women are looking for a reason for why they're stuck, right? Because they've tried all these diets and they think there's got to be something more here, right? That's keeping me in this position. And it definitely can be. And typically what we see is people aren't honoring these basics, and they don't have a foundation to work off of. When it comes to metabolic adaptation, there's a lot of side effects that can come from under eating for an extended period of time and our body's survival mechanisms kicking in. So I think it's important to understand the why behind that. And honestly, God knows how many episodes we're going to have about metabolism in and of itself, because there's a lot that goes into it. But, I think that so many women say, but my doctor said my labs are fine, but I don't feel good, or I'm on thyroid medication, or I got my thyroid removed, or I got my gallbladder removed. And I'm not saying there's anything right or wrong in those scenarios, but our approach is really getting to the root of the problem. And a lot of those issues and these things that women come to us for are downstream problems, right? It's one of the greatest explanations I had come across that I share a lot is that when our labs are off or we feel imbalanced, that's our check engine light, right? So it's not, we don't slap a Band-Aid or unplug the check engine light when it comes on, right? We see what's causing this problem, what's making this light go off. And that's really the approach that we like to take, and the way that we look at things is from a very holistic and zoomed out view, for lack of better explanation, I guess. But Jess, you mentioned, and obviously I know we talk about this a lot for you personally, like your glucose and your blood sugar, and taking berberine, and kind of how you've approached that in your own personal health, that I think is a really good example of this.
Yeah. So like a lot of times there is a hormone thing going on, but that doesn't mean that like doing some specific hormone protocol or taking some perfect supplement is going to fix the root cause. So the example Jill is referring to, ever since my second pregnancy, I had gestational diabetes. I've never had issues with blood glucose before. Never had A1C concerns when I go to my physicals. I don't have diabetes in my family. I eat pretty stinking well, and I strength train, which muscle is a really good processor of glucose. And I'm finding that, okay, I have high fasted blood sugar every single day. What the heck is going on here? So anyways, berberine is a supplement we can take that helps our bodies process glucose. I'm taking it, but guess what happens? If I stop taking berberine right now because I haven't actually fixed the root problem, my blood glucose goes right back up. So that's not the long-term solution here. And personally, me and Jill text about this like every other day, but personally, like the root of my pre-diabetes basically is lack of sleep and high stress levels. It's not a food related thing. I could have ice cream before bed, and if I get 8 hours of sleep, my glucose drops a little bit. Whereas I could eat perfectly healthy, but if I get less sleep that night, my glucose is spiking because it's a stress related thing. And then there's all these trickle downs. So like if someday I don't want to rely on supplements and have other things that could be a side effect of this, I need to start sleeping better. Like I need to stop drinking caffeine. I need to take care of my nervous system. I need to not be on my computer working at 10 p.m., so ultimately it's like, we got to fix the behaviors. We got to fix the habits, and like supplements and stuff like that can be a in between to help while you're working on the habits. But
Yep.
But yeah, at the end of the day, if you actually want to fix your stuff, you need to deal with some things that you probably have not been willing to change before leading up to this point that got you into that position to begin with.
Right. And like you mentioned with supplements or anything, it can bridge the gap for you, right? And give you relief. And I'm not saying sometimes those things are appropriate, right? Medications and antibiotics. And if your blood pressure is dangerously high, yeah, take a medication for a second until we get those lifestyle things down, right? We've had tons of clients come off of cholesterol medication and blood pressure meds and, reflux medications and things, right? They're there to give you relief, and that's good, right? In certain scenarios. But it's important to not rely on those things, because no matter what the issue is, we always have to make sure that we have that foundation. And we're always going to start really with all the same building blocks for every person to see what gaps do we need to fill, right? So I think that's really kind of the premise of this program, honestly, is whether it's your hormones or not that's causing an issue, weight loss resistance, low libido, hair loss, acne, bloating after every meal, can't sleep at night, you're waking up at 3 a.m., right? All of those problems absolutely indicate there could be a potential hormone issue or imbalance. But like Jess said, there's not this like, oh, this is the exact protocol for this problem or this lab work or whatever. We have to get to the root of it and get down to making sure that that foundation is there before we start throwing supplements and all of these other things in. And I think also, this is something that you talk about, Jess, in terms of like, why do you actually think that you have that hormone issue, right? Typically it's weight loss resistance, and that's a pretty easy fix. But if we've got brain fog and anxiety and GI issues and other things that are like impacting your day-to-day life, that's, when we have to dig a little bit deeper potentially. But no matter what, we have to start at the same place and ensure that our inputs are all in the right place first, which is exactly what we're going to talk about now. Versus some like crazy magical hormone protocol before we do anything else first.
So yeah, and then often what we see is clients be like, wow, my sleep's better, my digestion's good. I thought I had IBS, but maybe I didn't. And it's like, no, you might have had some underlying gut microbiome dysbiosis. You might have had some sort of whatever, thyroid issue or whatever, but then taking away some of those stressors and adding in some recovery modalities and nutrients and stuff can allow your body to heal itself. Okay, let's talk about the things that you can do right now. So we want to give you guys practical advice. If we have somebody who comes to us and they tell us that they suspect they might have hormone issues or gut issues or a thyroid problem or PCOS or whatever the thing is, we are starting with these basics. Okay. So even if after 6 months, they want us to run like a GI map, a stool sample, or a hair mineral analysis, like we can do all that stuff. In any case, we're still doing this for the first 6 months. Okay. So, to touch on those things, I'll kind of give a big picture, like stress, allostatic load. Like we have stressors that add up and add up and add up in our life. One stressor is not turning on this trigger of whatever our issue is. All the stressors combined are turning it on. So like I said, some of those stressors might be us staring at a screen all day. It might be our kids being crazy. It might be our to-do list in our head because we're always on the go and we thrive on this dopamine. It could be things like stimulants, caffeine, pre-workout drinks, doing cardio all the time. Like all of that stuff is putting our body in this high stress state. Once those things accumulate, that can turn on the triggers for these other hormone issues. Okay. So all of these things that we're going to talk about are basically bringing those stress loads down and or adding to your recovery bucket to kind of balance it out. So yeah. Jill, do you want to talk about some of those things on our list?
So that was exactly what I was going to say. So it's the accumulation of stressors, but it's also never allowing, it's a seesaw, right? If you're constantly dumping into this sympathetic nervous system in this stress bucket, sure, you can take stressors away and that's going to help. But speaking from personal experience, yeah, setting boundaries and eliminating stressors is great, but you actually have to do the active recovery and really put time into that in terms of shifting your nervous system into a parasympathetic state, which is our rest and digest, right? So, and let me be the first to say, I rolled my eyes at these things. I didn't believe in them. I thought they were woo-woo and weird and didn't actually have a purpose.
2 years ago, when I started working with Jill, every day she's showing me a picture of her freaking Alani Nu pre-workout drink. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? But it's because I was there too. And eventually my body freaking crashed. Yep. And it was like, time out. We can't take this anymore. Like it's allowing us to go right now in the moment. We're getting a lot done, but like someday your body's going to hate you.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's with anything too. It's, people say, well, I'm fine, or I don't have those symptoms, or it worked for me before. And that's all fine and dandy, right? I coasted through a straight survival mode for years. your body will tap out, right? It has a threshold and everyone's is different. So kudos to you for running on 3 hours of sleep and 600 milligrams of caffeine every day and not crashing. I promise that you will if you haven't yet, right? So I was very much a sleep when you're dead person. You got to grind and I, work all the time and and I can't relax and I can't focus during yoga and I'm bored and I'm too many things are in my brain. It's so important to understand that, EFT tapping and meditation and breath work and yoga, just like riding a bicycle and lifting weights and anything else that you do in life, it requires practice. You have to practice to be able to tap into that state, especially if you're somebody that tends to run most of the time in your sympathetic nervous system and being a stress case. And that was me, right? ADHD. And I have all these things and all these issues and I need to be constantly stimulated. Being bored is a really cool thing to help you slow down, right? So those are the types of things that you can do. And breath work can be 4-7-8 breath work is my favorite, and box breathing. These are things you can go do on, you can find on YouTube. You can do it for 2 to 5 minutes a day, and it will be a game changer for you. And initially you're going to be doing it and you're like, this isn't helping, this isn't helping, this isn't helping. It took me about 2 years to really be able to sit in a 30-minute meditation and actually release myself to it and focus. But I also didn't really put the effort fully in because I didn't allow myself to believe in it and allow myself to slow down. And honestly, I would say you could do it in a matter of weeks if you're really intentional with it and consistent. But it's really important to allow your body to be able to consciously shift into a parasympathetic state on a daily basis, not sometimes or here and there.
And parasympathetic state, the way I explain it to my clients is we have to train our bodies to essentially turn off your brain. Okay. So I was the same as Jill. I took a Tibetan yoga class, and it was a 2-hour intensive thing in college, 3 days a week. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this semester because this is the most boring thing I've ever done. I only did it for my exercise science credits. A month in, I was like, this is crazy. I don't understand it. But I wouldn't react in a high stress way, or I wouldn't have anxiety in other situations. It started to trickle into other things because I started to train my brain to be quiet. So if you think, yeah, I'm doing my yoga, I'm listening to meditations, but then you're thinking of your grocery list and stuff, that's not the intention behind it. The intention is actually to train your brain to react differently. And it is frustrating. It's boring. It takes time. After, I usually tell clients, if you really do try it every single day or at least 3 or 4 times a week, give yourself a month, because by next month, you're going to be like, I can't believe I never did this before. And I really thought it was hokey. I did not think that there was anything to it, but there's a lot of research on the scientific benefits for your brain. And we talked about lowering stressors. There's going to be some stressors that you can't control also. So if you're well, I got myself out of my stressful job and I'm not drinking as much caffeine and this and that, there's still there's environmental toxins. There's crap in some of our healthy food. They spray it with chemicals. You're
Right.
always going to have some stress load. So the idea is just we're reducing it as much as possible and increasing recovery as much as possible with whatever your given circumstances are.
Right.
So
controlling the controllables is what I always tell everyone, especially I tell my kid that when he's worried about a test or something, I'm like, what can you control in this situation? Let the rest go. And all of you, if you're listening to this and you have Googled the word cortisol in some fashion, I want you to rewind and listen to that all again, because I will never suggest a supplement to you if you don't tell me that you are doing all of these things first. And there's going to be more that we're going to tack onto that, but this is the most important thing to understand. And truly, like Jess mentioned, when you do those things and put them into practice, it's not like you can quit your job and eliminate every stressor and your kids are magically perfect. You're increasing your resilience to the stressors in your life so that you're not so triggered, so that you spill your coffee and it doesn't fuck up your whole day, and you don't, somebody cuts you off in traffic and you're ready to follow them to their place of work, right? That's the point, is that we shouldn't be so irritable and so frustrated and so tense all the time that we can.
And you don't have to be.
Yeah.
You don't have to be. You can retrain your brain to not be. So,
Yes.
Okay. So our list of things you can do right now. Thing number 1, our biggest recovery tool that we have, our bodies were made to sleep. That is when we produce hormones that support us in all of these things. If you are not getting deep sleep, so our quality of sleep matters too. It's not just hours. I know a lot of people who are like, fall right asleep after a shot of espresso. And I'm like, okay, I know you feel that way, but it affects, like, it
Right.
actually affects your REM sleep. So does alcohol. So does THC. Okay. So a lot of people will have a glass of wine or be like, oh, I smoked a little bit and I fell asleep fine. Quality of sleep matters, guys. You watching Netflix for a couple hours and then going to bed, even if you're sleeping for the same amount of hours, that stimulation is going to affect your brain so that you don't get that deep sleep. During deep sleep is when we produce our hormones and when your body is allowing itself to heal and optimize for the following day and future years. So sleep is number one, okay?
Yes.
Not just time of sleep, but especially your routine, like the time we go to bed and wake every day matters a lot for our circadian rhythm and our hormone production. If you wake up at the same time and you go outside and you see sunshine, that actually regulates our melatonin production so that we can sleep better the next night. So regularity of sleep, quality of sleep, and deep sleep, and not being overstimulated, and hours of sleep. Okay. So all of those things about sleep, I would say that is number one.
Yep. And number two is just adding in nutrients and eating more whole foods and less processed shit. Jess talked about, chemicals in food, whether they're good or bad or whatever. But really the focus and the emphasis that we put on for clients in, we have people that say, oh, I crave sugar and I crave these things and I can't control myself and I binge eat at night and whatever. The goal is to make sure, one, that your body is getting enough calories and enough nutrients, because I promise if you're eating 1,200 calories or whatever the calorie intake is that's low, you're not getting enough nutrients for your body, for you as a human. It's just not enough. So you want to make sure yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. And a lot of people who are eating enough or too many calories are eating junk calories that don't have the vitamins and minerals required. So we need our protein, we need our fiber, we need vitamins and minerals. So in either case, whether you are an overeater or an undereater, we need to add real nutrient dense food.
And I used to I eat the same thing every single day and this, that, and the other. That's actually not great. I wasn't getting a variety in my diet. I wasn't generally getting enough fiber in those scenarios. And I thought I was like so regimented and routine because I ate the same thing every day. It's actually not great. You do need a variety in your diet, but there's so many nuances, right? So it's important that you just focus on getting enough calories, getting enough protein, and putting an emphasis on fiber. You don't have to cut sodium and cut sugar and do all these things, because if you're getting protein and you're getting fiber, those things are naturally not going to fit into your diet anymore. And also you're going to eliminate a lot of those cravings and you're going to just feel more energized and more satisfied anyway, too, with making those changes to your diet.
Yep. So then the next thing would be stop doing high intensity and exercise or cardio as a means to lose weight. Okay. Cardio is excellent for your heart health, but if you are overdoing cardio and you think it's going to allow you to lose weight, it is doing the opposite. Cardio sends a signal that we are in stress. We are running from something, right? Like that is going to put us in that sympathetic fight or flight nervous system type state. And it actually also downregulates our metabolism. So the more and more you run or do cardio, the more efficient you become at that, the less calories you burn all the time so that your body can store that energy up for future use. Our bodies adapt to whatever inputs we give it. So instead, swap your high intensity exercise for lifting weights, okay? The more muscle mass we can put on our body, the better our metabolisms become. And again, that's also a trickle down for all of these other metabolic processes.
Mm-hmm. And, if you go to F45 or you do beach body workouts or Orange Theory, or you love boot camps because it's fun and exciting and all these things, that's great. We want you to have fun in your fitness. But if you suspect hormone issues or you're dealing with weight loss resistance, you are sending the wrong signal to your body. Like Jess said, you're actually sending endurance signals. And when you send those, for one, your body's going to become more efficient. And when it becomes more efficient, you're burning less calories anyway. So even if you are doing it for fat loss, I've seen people try to go twice a day and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're digging yourself further in a hole. You're sending the wrong signals. And like Jess said, you're just burning away the muscle that is going to be beneficial for healing and for your metabolic health long-term too. Also drink water, hydrate, and replace your caffeine and or alcohol with water where you can. And I'm not saying you can't have fun drinks here and there, but Jess mentioned the effect of caffeine and alcohol on our sleep is I've had people say, but it helps me fall asleep too. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. But like, that's a Band-Aid, right? Like it's temporary and your quality of sleep is still shit. And you're telling me you fall asleep quickly, but then you're telling me you're tired all the time. Well, how fast you fall asleep doesn't matter if you're still exhausted every day, right? Because of that poor quality sleep. And your body needs water to do all of these things and operate optimally, right? So caffeine, really, I'm not saying you have to eliminate it. Trust me, I'm a coffee girl through and through, but you really should set a timeline for yourself. Now, yes, I agree to some extent about delaying your caffeine intake a little bit in the mornings to allow your cortisol to rise naturally and not, again, throwing kinks in the mix. But really cutting it off by a certain time as well and making sure that you're eating before caffeine consumption, especially if you do have cortisol or hormone concerns. Same thing with alcohol. Your body perceives it as a toxin. It's the probably, if I could pick one thing that's the most detrimental to your hormone health and just your quality of life in general, your sleep, everything, it's alcohol. Now, don't get me wrong. I love a good margarita on the rocks on, Taco Tuesday, but we have to decide what's our focus and what does balance look like for us and what goal are we prioritizing. And if you have hormone health concerns, you probably should put that on the back burner for a little bit. So hydrating with actual water. If you need to add flavor, cool, whatever you got to do to get it down. Typically, we say at least half your body weight in ounces of water per day. I tend to drink a little bit more than that, but really when it comes to fluids in general, that's going to be the most beneficial approach when it comes to your hormone health.
And then last but not least, we talked about this a little bit with adding nutrients, but stop dieting. Okay. So if you have been on and off of these cycles of diets for years and years and years, that is a major stressor, one of the biggest stressors on your body. Okay. Like think about how our bodies have adapted over time. If we are not getting enough food, that becomes the number one priority. Our body says, shoot, we need to survive. We need calories. We need energy. So our body stores that energy for our future us, right, to live. It is not concerned at that point with thriving, with reproducing, with having optimal digestion. Like if our body is in just try to survive mode, it's not going to be making regular bowel movements. Like there's all these things that are tied to that. So if you have been dieting for a long time and you suspect hormonal issues, stop dieting. And again, we're not just adding in junk, we're adding back in nutrients, but we're going to slowly adapt your calories higher and higher and higher until we're at a point where we're just maintaining, but we're nourishing your body. And again, it allows things to heal underneath.
Yeah. And, obviously when it comes to metabolism, dieting in and of itself, like that's a whole nother episode that you guys will hear. But, you're essentially, your body is perceiving this diet as a major stressor. Your body doesn't know if you are in a time of famine where you don't have access to food, which dates literally back to prehistoric times, or if you're just eating 800 calories because you want to lose 10 pounds this week. Your body doesn't recognize the reason for the lack of food intake, right? And the lack of energy. So when it's in this fight or flight state, stress is high, right? I use this example so much, but if a lion or a bear is chasing you, you're in fight or flight, right? Your body's not going to prioritize burning fat anyway. So you're triggering this stressor, right, internally, and your body digestion is going to get worse. Your energy is going to be low. Your hormones are going to be low. All of these negative impacts are happening. Now, we're not saying you can't go in a calorie deficit ever, but we need to prioritize if you do have hormonal concerns, metabolic concerns, whatever the case is, you've got to take some time off from dieting. And that does not equate to weight gain. Let me add that caveat there. But you have to give your body what it's been asking you for, and you can't burn fat easily or feel good and energized and all of those things that you want to feel in your day-to-day life if your body isn't in an optimal state and getting like Jess said, just basic needs met, right? So if you're feeling crappy all of the time, you have to do something different. And I think they say the daily recommended calorie intake for a toddler is like 13 to 1400. I want you to sit on that for a second. If you are eating that amount of calories or less, or even close to it, honestly, it's not enough for a grown-ass woman to be eating and functioning optimally, let alone fertility or anything else that comes into play. So I don't think we can stress the stop dieting point enough, honestly. And you guys are probably going to get sick of hearing it. And we actually don't care.
And again, it's not like we don't help our clients lose body fat. That is what we do. But we need to send those safety signals to their brain first and make sure they are operating at a healthy level. Then their bodies will respond to a diet. Then their bodies will start to work with them. So that's the approach that we take.
Yeah. Now, let's say you do all these things, right? You're just kumbaya all the time. You eat your protein, get your fiber, and you're hydrated, you're sleeping well, you're strength training, whatever, right? You're doing all these things. Sometimes there is a deeper issue, right? And sometimes we do have to run testing and go a little bit further and add in specific protocols. If there's, like Jess mentioned, like a gut issue, or, there's cortisol has tanked because it was high for too long and their body crashed, right? So there are certain scenarios where we do have to say, we got to take this a step further and implement more specific protocols and supplementation and things, but it's all based on lab work and it's all temporary, right? Because nobody needs to eat paleo or Whole30 or any of those things forever. Now, in a perfect world, would everyone eat 6 times a day and get 60 grams of fiber and eat all their protein and hydrate and only eat whole foods and never anything processed? Of course, but it's not realistic, right? We have to find, again, what that balance looks like for you. And you don't have to cut out caffeine forever, or alcohol forever, but we have to decide how quickly do we want to heal this, for one, right? How fast do we want to go and get you to a place that you're feeling better? And with labs, like Jess mentioned, we can run GI maps and Dutch tests, which is a hormone test, and these other labs, like blood labs, which is going to be a lot more than your typical PCP would run. And we also operate on optimal numbers, not just normal that you'll see on your lab work. And it's important to understand that normal is based on general population, and general population is obese,
unhealthy and obese,
and unhealthy. Yeah. So I think they say I'll have to look up this number to make sure I'm not totally off base, but I'm pretty sure the numbers that are considered normal are based on like the healthiest, like 70% of the population. Odds are in our favor, really.
And they're updated every so often also. So
Right.
It's like as our society becomes less and less healthy, these are more and more normal. So we go off of optimal blood tests. And again, it's usually like 1% of our clients that we even need to run this stuff with, because usually in the first 6 months, their symptoms are going away.
Yeah.
And again, if there are underlying issues, they're going to be in a really strict protocol at that point. No caffeine, no alcohol, lots of parasympathetic inputs, yoga every day. Like, we're going to put them on such a protocol that, like, why not try the basics first? Why not? If it fixes your stuff, you don't need to spend all this money on labs. You don't need to do all these crazy protocols and supplementation. So, to wrap it up, is it your hormones? Yeah, maybe. But like, you don't need to do all this crazy stuff. Like, let's do the basics. Let's start with those few things that we mentioned and stop dieting.
even if your labs are off, you still have to meet the basics anyway, right? That's never going to change or go away. So we still need to get your sleep into a good place, cut back caffeine and alcohol, hydrate, add nutrients, especially protein, fiber, carb, whole fruits, all of those things, add strength training, dial back cardio. And like just mentioned, for the love of God, please stop dieting. So until next time,
check yourself before you wreck yourself.